Welcome to the Culture is Healing podcast, brought to you by Checking In. At Checking In, we create customized wellness tools for First Nations communities, centering each nation's language, culture, and traditions to support healing and well-being for their people. To learn more about our work at Checking In, please visit our website at checkingin.co. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy this episode. Haichka. Aichquel, Ichawal, Antapat, Hokolitza, Staminis, Halalt, Kawatson, Lyaxon. Hello, everyone. My traditional name is Hokolitza. My English name is George Harris Jr., and I'm calling you today from my home here in Staminis. This is the community that my father is from. This is the community my mother had married into. And this is the community that my siblings and I were raised in. I belong to George Harris Sr. and my late mother, Sylvia Harris. My grandparents from my father's side of my family are the late Lawrence and Irene Harris. My grandparents from my mother's side of my family are the late Bernard and Nora George. My familial connections to Halalt come from my mother, Sylvia, and my grandmother, Nora. My connections to Gawitson come from my grandfather, Bernard. And through both sides of my family, I have familial connections to Lyaxon. The name that I carry, Hokolitza, is a name that my father carries. He's passed it on to myself and a few other family members. And this name has been passed down from generation to generation throughout our family. And I'm very honored to be able to share that name with my father and my other family members as well. And I just want to welcome everyone to the Culture is Healing podcast. Once again, my name is Hokolitza, and I'm host for the Culture is Healing podcast. And I have the honor and privilege of being able to sit with a new friend of mine. He is fairly well known in BC, and he goes around and shares some of the amazing places and amazing things that we have in British Columbia. And I'd love to open the floor to Bob for him to be able to introduce himself.
The honor and the privilege is absolutely mine. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Bob Kronbauer. Most people know me as BC Bob, and I'm a content creator. I'm a third-generation settler. My heritage goes back to Austria and Russia, and I grew up in Vernon, BC. And I have a TV show. I make social medias. You might have seen me on TikTok and Instagram, and that's my full-time job. And I have a lot of friends in Indigenous communities. It's quite a bit of the work that I do. Telling stories is being granted the opportunity to help tell stories with my Indigenous friends.
Mm-hmm.
That's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and we actually do have some connections to some relatives. I know Kelsey and Keegan from up in Staelis, and my cousin Wade from Musqueam. So some really cool tie-ins that we didn't know that we had until recently. So it was really cool to share those connections.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Yeah, it's a small world for sure. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, and so as we kind of love to dive into some of our conversations, and I always love sharing the name of our podcast is Culture is Healing. And, this is a saying that means so much to so many of our people, and especially in our Indigenous communities. We have a strong understanding that, culture can heal our people, and it has healed our people for thousands upon thousands of years. And, you've been lucky enough to be welcomed in to a lot of communities, and you've had the opportunity to observe, the power of our culture. And so when I say that phrase, culture is healing, I'm curious to know, Bob, what does that mean to you?
It goes back all the way to high school when I grew up in Vernon, BC. It's the traditional territory of the CL, the Okanagan Indian Band. But we didn't know that. Nobody in my high school knew that aside from the kids that showed up on the bus. And the teachers were like, yeah, the Indians, they come in and they live out there and they come in, and I was friends with them. Dwayne Lawrence, Jason Marchand, all bunch of different families. And we knew nothing of their culture. We had no
Mm,
idea that we were living on their traditional territory. We we really had no clue. And it's only, you know, 30 years later that I'm coming to learn some stories from the OKIB, and I need to go there and spend some time with them. But it it's really changed a lot. And
mm,
when I noticed that change was my son, who's now 16. When he was 6 years old, he came home from elementary school, and I can't remember what I was talking about, what specifically I was talking about, but I was talking about the tsleil
mm,
and I mispronounced it. And he's 6 years old, and he's like, "Dad, it's Tsleil-Waututh." And I was like,
mm,
oh, "What?" Like the fact that he even knew what the
mm,
Tsleil-Waututh people were, that they existed, that we were on their territory. He knew so much more than I did about it because they're teaching it in schools now, and it's kids are proud to be Indigenous. And it's not that I wasn't proud to be friends with Jason Marchand and Dwayne Lawrence, but I'm I just look at it now as a point of pride for Indigenous people, that
mm,
the culture is healing, and that I feel it's like our responsibility as settlers to help that healing along and to allow it. And in my work, it's personally helping to get those stories out there. There are lots of Indigenous creators, and we save space for them, and I share their stories. But it being able to tell those stories and confirm to my Indigenous friends, like, this is awesome, your culture. I don't have that sort of culture. Our family, we have family reunions and stuff like that, but as white people, we don't have, or even people from Russia and Austria, we don't have a, I don't call my white friends my cousins,
mm,
or any, because I don't feel connected to them. And that healing from actually having culture and having culture all around you, I feel that as well. I feel like being welcomed into these communities, it's healing for me.
mm,
But anyways, so that's sort of a long way to say that it's just, I'm hopeful, and I'm committed to reconciliation, even though I don't really agree with that word, because we're not reconciling, because we never were living in harmony. We kind of
mm,
just came in and bulldozed our way in. But relationship building is what our your cousin Wade calls it, and that's
mm,
what I call it. But as a way of just quickly describing it, reconciliation is on me.
mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. It's really cool to hear different people's perspectives on what culture's healing means, and I absolutely love asking that question because it's different for each person. And it all comes down to experiences they've had, and you've been very fortunate to be welcomed into and some really cool experiences, and actually that's kind of the next question I would like to ask. In the experiences that you've had the opportunity to partake and witness a lot of really cool cultural activities, and um, I'd love to hear some of those cultural activities that hold a special place in your heart.
This is a funny one. Preparing salmon.
Mm-hmm.
It's I've been fishing for salmon for many years. You know, out there with a on a boat or on the side of a river.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally love salmon. I have a great connection with salmon. My dad we grew up fishing and going to the spawning grounds and stuff. And when I started going into Indigenous communities and hanging out with people, the Qualilas Hotel in Port Hardy. This was just a couple years ago, but
Mm-hmm.
it's owned by the Guasala Nakdoa. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly. I try my best. I do try my best. I don't get them all right, but they own a hotel in Port Hardy, and I stayed there. And I was just, I went for fish and chips in the hotel restaurant, and I started chatting up with the cook. And she was like, "Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, hey, come check this out." And she took me into the back and around the side of the hotel, and they have a little smokehouse there. And I was like, "This is amazing!" It was
Mm-hmm.
so cool. And she showed me, she had some salmon, I think it was sockeye, um, and she was preparing it. And I unfortunately was not going to be there when it was going to be ready, probably the next day. So I didn't get to eat any of it. But salmon always comes up, and I mean, like my shirt, I'm just here for the bannock. I'm also here for the salmon. Like, and it seems like most of the experiences I've had in Hartley Bay, we went to go to tell the story about spirit bears. And so
Mm-hmm.
Marvin Robinson took us out, and he does tours out there. The Git Gat Nation, he runs the tours
Mm-hmm.
to go see spirit bear sightings. And his wife, Terry Robinson, Terry Clifton, we were staying in, I don't want to call it an Airbnb. They have a house that you can rent out, or they hosted us in this. Don't want to also call it a spare house, but for all intents and purposes, that's what it was. And she welcomed us. She welcomed me because I was like, "Hey, I saw some smoke coming out of this little building behind her house." And I was like, "Hey, what's going on in here?" Knowing full
Mm-hmm.
well what was going on in there. And so she took me in there. It's awesome. I follow her on Facebook now. We're friends on Facebook, and she always shares um, photos of their harvesting and of her
Mm-hmm.
preparing the salmon with Granny, and it's awesome. I have one more, and it was the Slaman First Nation recently on National Indigenous Peoples Day. I went there because they were welcoming canoes from Hamalco and Clahus and I think Comox, and they were repatriating some items that were from the museums in Vancouver that were coming back, and that day
Mm-hmm.
was a big celebration for them where they were opening um, Zaya, their cultural center there. And so I stayed overnight, and I got there early, got to the beach super early. There's nobody there, but a lady and her grandson are setting up a fire, and they're setting up tables, and I'm like, "Hey, is there anything I could do to help? Because I got nothing to do. I'm just sitting around."
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "No, we're okay." And then I just kind of lingered around, and then there came a point where she was like, "Hey, you." And so she recruited me, and I was like, "Oh, great. I actually can help here." And so she was barbecuing salmon with her grandson and another fellow. And I helped, wire them up and stick
Mm-hmm.
them in the ground. And, like I had my place, and I was there for hours. And in the end, it ended up being the former chief was the other guy that was helping us.
Mm-hmm.
Clint, I can't remember what his last name was, but then when the canoes came in, the salmon was for them, and so they came and they enjoyed it. They also had bannock there, of course, and it's just, I love salmon. I love the experience of salmon, and what I'm hoping for. This is something that we talked about before about salmon, you and I, but I didn't
Mm-hmm.
mention this. There's a place where I go fishing on the Cheakamus River up in Squamish. And on the one side is a lodge and some property. Some people have bought these cabins and stuff, and you can walk up on this side and fish from that side of the river. And then on the other side of the river is Squamish territory. I believe it's Squamish territory.
Mm-hmm.
And they have traditional fishing that they'll be doing from the other side, where
Mm-hmm.
I'm on this side trying my best all day to catch one fish, you know, with a fly and trying to like just maybe luck upon a fish. And on the other side they're harvesting, so they're using different methods and bringing in coolerfuls of fish, and I'm sitting there going, oh man. And it really has always kind of defined for me the divide that we have,
Mm-hmm.
because some of the settler fishers on this side don't understand, and it's like we're just set up across from each other, and
Mm-hmm.
we're watching, and I know what's going on the other side, but to them, to anybody that would just walk into that situation as a settler on the outside, what's happening there is like somebody's just harvesting a ton of fish while, we only get one, and we're kind of set up to butt heads with each other. anyways, this is my call out. If anybody sees this and they're from Squamish, please let me help you go fishing and harvest on the other side, because I want to know exactly how it works. Like I would love to do that. I've been trying to find somebody to talk to do that, but it would be incredible to literally see it from the other side and do
Mm.
that good, to tell that story also, because that's what I
Mm-hmm.
do. It's all about telling stories, and that one is one that's been sitting there for a few years now. I need to pursue it.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love hearing your experience too, and I think one of the important things that I always love and showcase to a lot of people that in our traditional gatherings, our ceremonies, you framed it very beautifully. There's always food attached to our ceremonies. We love to be able to host people and to feed people, and hearing your stories, attaching food to it is very important. Salmon is so important to our people, and I love that you're wearing the shirt, and I love the story behind that as well. And bannock is something that is very we all have those relatives who are always like the best at making the bannock, and you always have that one auntie or someone who does it really well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we make it at my house too.
Yeah.
There's this company called Bang and Bannock, and
Mm-hmm.
they it's a mix in bags, and I
Mm-hmm.
mean it's like a pretty easy recipe. I actually don't know what it is. It's like baking powder, salt, and flour maybe, but they just package it up super easy. And the portions are they're based in South Vancouver, and it's like, I don't know, $8 a bag or something. And the instructions are just right there. It's dead easy to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been doing it with my son. I've been making these bags of bannock. I'm almost ready to graduate into having my own recipe, like where it's like I can mix it, but I feel safe having this easily made
Mm-hmm.
concoction. And so, yeah, we make it at my house. I make it with hot dogs. That's my favorite one, is
Oh
if you
yeah.
put a hot dog in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And that's a hit at the house. Like my wife loves it, my son loves it. We just put mustard on it, and yeah, but I'll, if I could tell you the story of this shirt, and
Oh
it ties
yeah.
into another thing. So, um, the what's the celebration at the P&E every year? The Nishka. Uh,
Is it the Hubier?
yeah, yeah. So every year I go to that, and I get the T-shirt there because they always have a great T-shirt. Like, to, hey, I was there, and I saw dances, and it reminds you that you were there. So I have T-shirts from the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
But I was and I go there to, because they have a marketplace. They'll have all the celebrations and all the gatherings and all the protocol and all that. But
Mm-hmm.
also just, it's like an event that people just go to, where there's food trucks and there's a marketplace where you can buy stuff. And I'd been looking for this shirt, and so I put on Facebook, like, hey, does anybody know where I could get one of these shirts? And so Timmy from Stallo, she does a t-shirt booth there where they can just print up whatever they want. So
Mm-hmm.
I ended up getting her to print it up for me, and I bought it at the show. And also, this is something that I have learned about Indigenous people, and I made a funny video about this. But in the last, like, 2 years, if I had $1 for every time I heard somebody say I seen it on Auntie's Facebook, I would have $30. Like, it's the way that Indigenous folks use Facebook is the way that it should be used.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow, nobody else can figure out how to properly use it. It's all just arguments, and it's just so negative. But it's truly designed to foster community and to be a place where people are talking about stuff they saw and sharing, and not, I'm sure there's lots of fighting. I don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture of Indigenous harmony, but from the outside,
Mm-hmm.
it's awesome. Facebook is, so it seems like a vital resource for Indigenous folks throughout British Columbia, from what I've seen. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, yeah, I seen it on Auntie's Facebook is like, that should be a shirt.
Yeah, most that's got to be your next one.
Yeah, maybe I'll get Timmy to make me that shirt. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. And even just kind of like, reflecting on some of the things you're sharing here too, talking about, harvesting salmon, and I think, there's definitely beautiful thing that does come from that harvesting. It may look like it's a lot, and there's definitely a distinct mindset that is different in Western society compared to the indigenous communities, where on the outside you're seeing like a few individuals who are indigenous individuals who are harvesting a lot. It might look like they're doing that and they're you know over harvesting, but the understanding from our community, and we know that um, those people are harvesting a lot, but it's not just for them.
Hmm.
It's for the
Yeah.
community.
Hmm.
And a lot of times, like I know, um, in our community, our nation, we had recently had our food fish came in, and so there's let's say, I don't know, I'm just throwing numbers out. Let's say there's 20 people who might look like they're harvesting all the fish, and to a Western person, they're like, wow, what are those 20 guys going to do with, those thousands of fish? And you're like, wow, that's too much for those people. If you're looking at it from those numbers, but the context behind it all is this food, this fish is for the entire community. Where a household out of that catch, we might get 10 salmon for a year, compared to what it used to be like, pre colonization, we would have, quite a few salmon to live off of throughout the whole year. And so, yeah, that's kind of the fundamental difference is it's one's gathering for a community, and one might be gathering for an individual family.
Yeah, that's what when I'm out there, I'm we have a small freezer and I'm catching one fish and it's enough for me. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I would say, like we don't see you don't see a gill netter. You ever seen a gill netter?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of fish.
Yeah.
And I mean, sure, there are certainly indigenous fisheries too that have gill netters and stuff. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of where I see somebody and it's me, and then there's other people on the other side of the river.
Mm-hmm.
It's sometimes tough to grasp too, and because you don't even know who that person is and you've never met them. It's just a divide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of cool too. Like even thinking about those types of things, and I even had a conversation with my friend Sean, and we were talking about um, you know he just recently got a boat passed down to him from his grandpa, and we were talking about fishing, and we were talking about daily limits and stuff like that, and I was just curious, asking those types of questions because from a Western society point, like I wanted to know what the daily limits were, and I'm not restricted to that same rules, but I always want to be mindful and respectful as well, and I know um don't want to be over harvesting by any means. Our people were taught to only take what you need, and even when we're harvesting, whether it's fish or deer, or if we're harvesting food like plants, or harvesting for medicines, we only take what we need. And even if we are harvesting for medicines, like we take, the most you take from a plant is maybe a third of it. You leave the other 2/3 alone so it can continue to live and continue to grow. So we're always just being mindful of our environment and mindful of, Mother Nature and being respectful. And and I think that's kind of neat stuff to share and to talk about. And really cool hearing some of your stories and your connections to some of the cultural events that you've had the opportunity to partake in. So thank you for sharing.
Thanks again. I can't. I said this to you 10 times before we started, but I'm just honored to be here, and I'm stoked to talk to you.
Hachika. Yeah, it's really cool to be able to sit down and to be able to have these conversations, and I think it's definitely been something that not only have guests enjoyed hearing, but also the group of listeners that we have coming to listen on a regular basis, because there's so many people who haven't had the same kind of experiences, and they're now getting to learn from not only myself but the guests that we have on, and learn from the experiences that guests have had. And so thank you for your willingness to come on and share.
Happy to.
Yeah, and so thinking about the opportunities you've had to come into Indigenous communities. You've had quite a few relatives, share with you some stories and share some teachings with you. I was wondering if you'd be willing to share, some of those teachings that have been passed on to you that, you hold close to your heart.
The one that is just my absolute favorite was kind of, I think it was the first time in my work that I was welcomed into an Indigenous community and was able to retell a story and was shared a story um, that I didn't know previously, and that I felt honored to be able to sit down with somebody, and it's actually your cousin.
Mm.
So Kelsey Charlie. In 2016, I hosted and co-produced a TV show called BC Was Awesome. I'm the founder of the community website Vancouver is Awesome, and we had a TV
Mm-hmm.
show that we did for 3 seasons,
Mm-hmm.
and it got nominated for a bunch of awards. I think that one probably actually got nominated for a Leo Award, but that episode. But um, we in that season actually we wanted to tell the real story, and the word decolonize the story wasn't top of mind for me, but it's actually what we ended up doing. Looking back on it, we sort of decolonized the stories of Sasquatch and Ogopogo and the Fernie curse, the curse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with the Sasquatch episode, first we went, and my producers would kind of just drop me in. I would do some basic research to begin with, but then they would line up all the interviews, and I would have questions on a piece of paper, and they would kind of just drop me in like on a parachute. And it's like, okay, here's this person, go talk to this
Mm-hmm.
person. And I was like, okay. And so first we talked to um, this settler guy who took us out on a Sasquatch hunt. And so, we weren't obviously hunting for them, but he calls it that just because it, maybe because it attracts business. I don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
we're obviously not armed. We're just out there in Sta'alis territory, out by Harrison, off Harrison Lake, looking for Sasquatch in a side by side. And so we go out, we look for a Sasquatch. We get to a viewpoint over Harrison Lake, and he actually points out Sta'alis. And he's like, yeah, that's where the Indians live, and they have some stories about this, but and then he brings out these footprints that he's got, and he talks all about the search for Sasquatch, and the colonial story of what it is and how he does these tours and where people have seen it, um and so he told that side of it. And then the afternoon we drove over to Sta'alis that we could see from his viewpoint,
Mm-hmm.
and we were at their cultural center there, and Kelsey Charlie was the guest that I was to interview.
Mm-hmm.
And we walk in and they're setting up the cameras and stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool. And they've got, now thinking back of what was there, it's like some really cool cultural artifacts that are in this room that we were in. One of them is a
Mm-hmm.
mask that got I think it was stolen and then returned to the nation.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a Sasquatch mask that was at the Museum of Vancouver. Different story altogether. But we go in there and I'm like, oh hey, how are you? I'm Bob, and I'm chatting up with Kelsey before the cameras go on, and I'm like, oh, have you ever seen Sasquatch? She's like, no, I've never seen it. And then cameras go on, we get to chatting, and this is probably the first like real deep dive I did in an interview with an Indigenous guest on the show,
Mm-hmm.
and or ever, to be honest with you. Um, because I've been with Vancouver's Awesome. I've been a journalist for the last 18 years, and have done lots of interviews. Most of them are just about stuff going on in the city and,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff, but had never really sat down to chat with somebody about a story like this. Um, so we get to talking, and he tells me all about how it's a spiritual being and how it's a
Mm-hmm.
shapeshifter. And I'm like, oh, because I didn't come into this story believing in Sasquatch. I've
Mm-hmm.
been fishing and camping my entire life. I've never heard of it. I know people who reported seeing it, but I've and I just have I'm a skeptic about, why haven't we found its bones? How come there's nothing that scientifically that we can prove that this thing exists here? And so that's what I went into this interview with the opinions of. And he starts to tell me about how it's a spiritual creature, and you're only going to see it when you're ready to see it. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get this. Like I can understand this. And yes. And then I ask him the question. One of the questions is on my sheet of paper. It's like, have you ever seen Sasquatch? Knowing full well what his answer is going to be, because I already asked him the question half
Mm-hmm.
an hour earlier. And he's like, yeah, I've seen it. And I was like, what? And you can see it in the interview if you go back and watch the episode, because I'm just like shocked that he's saying
Mm-hmm.
yes, he's seen it. I'm like, what, really? And then he tells me the story about how he was driving down I think it was a logging road, and he looked out the window, and there was one saskets is the word that they use to describe it, or is not to use the word, that's the name of the thing that has
Mm-hmm.
been colonized and turned into Sasquatch because it's easier to pronounce. But so he sees Saskat's there, and it's got its hands open, and he describes this scene that I've just taken with me, where there's a smaller one, and the bigger one
Mm-hmm.
is giving the smaller one water and is feeding it water, and he tells us just this wonderful story. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. And I look back at that as sort of the catalyst of like, I need to I need to build an actual relationship with Indigenous folks before somebody's going to actually tell me a story. Because
Mm-hmm.
when we just met, it's like, hey, buddy, seen Sasquatch? It's like, no, get out of my face. Like, what are you talking
Mm-hmm.
about? Like, if you just, but we got into a conversation, and he understood that I was actually engaged and I was going to truthfully tell this story. And so he was able to tell me the truth, and tell, not the truth, like, not like he was lying to me, but it's not a story that you can just randomly answer out of the blue without really getting into the nitty gritty of it. And that's a story. And then that night, I decided to stay overnight. So I camped on the side of Harrison Lake
Mm-hmm.
that night, in the place where the many sightings had been, and where, the creature, not the creature, but where the Staalis folks have been seeing it forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, am I going to see it? Am I ready to see it? And just kind
Mm-hmm.
of, I didn't, and I haven't, but
Mm-hmm.
that's one story that I take with me, and it sort of set this all off. Like, and yeah, I look very fondly back on that. And I maintain a relationship with the Charlies. I go out for their soccer tournaments, and
Mm-hmm.
Keegan and I built a drum together.
Mm-hmm.
I built this drum with Keegan. It's not as good as the one that he built for me, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
um, yeah, and I'm gonna be going out on a tour with Keegan soon. They do some cultural tours out there where they go up the river, and anyways, it's th- that's one thing that I just really has a special place in my heart. I mean, all these places I go, and people I meet, and stories I'm able to to first selfishly gather for myself, but then also tell to other people, my audiences, every
Mm-hmm.
one of them. You know, when you say which one holds a special place in your heart, they really all do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh,
But yeah,
that's
maybe I'll
beautiful.
see Saskats one day. One day
Mm-hmm.
I might, but I don't know.
When you're
I don't know if
ready.
I'm ready. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something else for sure, and I think too, like, there's that really strong teaching that goes along with that, when you're ready. That doesn't sound like a lot, but there's not only just having that belief, that also helps you prepare, but there's so many other things that go along with it, the spiritual, the mental, the physical, the emotional. All of those things have to be aligned for you to be ready. And I think we all, in my language, it's Tlamaquis. Tlamaquis is Sasquatch, and that's the name in my language. And we have our, everyone has their own stories, and I know for me it was same territory was my first experience was up in Staalis. I was outside the longhouse, and I was fairly young. I think I was maybe in my preteens age, and we were my father and I were up there for ceremonial purposes, and we're winter time and it's fairly cold. And but I had to head out to my dad's truck. I had like a pocket full of coins from earlier on in the evening, and um it was just a lot. And so I just asked my dad for the keys so I can go, and because my coin bag was in the truck, so I went to go put it in there, and I was gonna grab some iced teas for myself and my dad. And I was outside for maybe 10 minutes, but I think it was uh, just a couple minutes too long. And it was just kind of one of those moments where, um, I some of our relatives up in the North Island and stuff, they traditionally sing on a log. And so it has a very distinct sound compared to like a drum.
Okay.
And there was probably maybe a handful or two of people outside, and we just heard this loud like thumping that was going to the same beat as the drums from the longhouse. And I was just like, whoa, like that's, when you have something that is large enough to be swinging a tree to hit another tree to keep on beat with the drum, that's not a human. And that's something that, has that cultural belonging to our people. And so we all kind of, we couldn't really see each other's expressions or anything because it was dark. And the only light that we were able to see each other was from the moonlight. But I just remember seeing, everyone's, the figures of them that I could see start to scurry, and everyone started making their way back into the longhouse. And so I was like, well, I could tell you this, I ain't going to be the last one out here, that's for sure. So I quickly put my stuff away in my dad's truck and grabbed our drinks and then went back inside. And I was like, I'm not going out there without my dad again. So I'm just going to wait. And that was like, my first experience. And, that always stuck with me. It was powerful for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of neat too, because I wasn't outside alone. And every single one of those people had that same feeling like, wow, like that is something else for sure. So we we respected Tlamaquist and left Tlamaquist alone out in the woods there, and just let Tlamaquist, enjoy and partake in their own way. And we just went back in with everybody else.
Did you leave your coins in the truck? And for other people, that don't know what that is, I'm going to assume you had the coins because of some cultural thing and you were a witness or something like.
Yeah.
So sort of two-pronged question for you there. What happened to the coins and why did you have the coins? Sorry, I'm
So
interviewing you now.
yeah, no. So like at the beginning of the work, like they called witnesses, and so I was because I share the same name as my father. So they called for to stand and to witness the work. And so, I got to stand beside my father and was called to be a witness for the work that was happening that day. And so that's why I had all the coins. And so that the family who was hosting, they all came and they give gifts to the witnesses and thanking them for being a witness to the work. And so the purpose behind that is if anyone were ever question the work that happened that day, they can call upon the people that were asked to be witnesses to ensure that the work was done in the proper way. And so that's what some of the stuff that was happening that day. And so we genuinely carry like little coin pouches that are usually hand knit together. And some have designs on them and stuff like that. And the one I have was has a soccer ball on it, knit on it, and
that's soccer territory.
Yeah,
they love soccer there.
Yeah, and so I've had mine for that particular one for quite a number of years, and I should have remembered to bring it in with me, but I forgot it. That's why I was like went out to the truck to go and put all my coins in that pouch, so I didn't have to carry it around. And so so I just literally just emptied my pockets into that, threw all the quarters in that pouch, and just left it in the truck and went back into the longhouse after that. So that's what happened to my coins that day. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and then the last like experience I had was a few years back now, and it was with my late brother, my late bro, Sean. Him and I used to work together at our community center, and we closed up, and it was late. It was probably, we shut down at 9, but we had a few other things that we needed to do to prepare for another event that was coming up. So we worked another about an hour's worth of overtime, and so it's about 10 o'clock at night, and yet again, this is winter time. And so I was like, oh, like, bro, do you need a ride home? And he was like, oh, my wife's, she's coming to pick me up. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'll just hang out with you. We'll just so we locked the door and we're just standing outside. We're both kind of like leaning on my car, and where our community center is, behind our community center is like our daycare, our health center, and then our primary school. But behind those buildings is just forest. It's fairly thick. It's kind of, there's swampier territory back there, and so it's not lands that we use frequently. It's just very sparsely used, and so it's not a lot of people go back there, and we're just kind of chilling, and then we just kind of hear this little ooh, like coming from the woods in the back area, and it's a ways back there, and we both kind of got silent, and then we noticed that there was like not a whole lot of noise happening around us. We're kind of eyes are getting big, and you can just hear it getting louder, just go ooh, ooh. I was like, oh God, like what's going on, dude? And he's, I don't know. And so we just like tried to play it off and just like kept talking. And then one last like ooh, ooh, like, and it kept getting louder. And we're like, oh gosh, like, and then like 30 seconds later of silence, we just hear this loud, like guttural, like a loud scream. And we're like, okay. I'm like, that's like Clumaquist, man. Like, we just kind of, it's like one of two things has got to happen, Sean. I was like, one, we either got to go back inside, or two, we got to go in my car and get out of here. Like, Clumaquist, like, might not be happy that we're out here right now. And
Yeah.
so we got in my car and waited, and like 30 seconds later or so, like maybe a minute or two at most, his wife showed up. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, so that was kind of my experiences that I've had. And like that scream, like I'll never forget. Like it just kind of felt like it like shook you to your core. Like you could feel it in your chest.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, it was kind of a neat experience. And you know, Sean, he was a very avid hunter, and so he knew right away. He's had a lot more experience than me, so he knew.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he was the first one to point it out. He's like, oh yeah, he's like Clumaquist. I'm like, all right, dude, like you ain't got to do much more convincing for me. I'm like, I get you, I got you, I'm good. Yeah. So yeah, those are my stories.
Cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really cool. And you know, maybe one day, Bob.
Maybe
one day you'll be ready.
Maybe. But until
Yeah.
that day, I'll just keep telling Kelsey's story and the story of how he told me his story.
Yeah. 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 Now you've heard two sets of stories.
Yeah.
Now mine wasn't a visual one. Mine was the audio. So
Yeah. The one with the logs. And that was right outside Kelsey's house, right? Is that
Yep.
where that longhouse was? It's Dallas?
Yep.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yep. So yeah, got two from the same spot, and from, you know, one from in community and one from a guest coming into community. So
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Well, I do spend quite a bit of time there. I'm going there this week, but I'm not out there to try and see or witness but I am out there quite a bit.
Yeah. 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 No, it just yeah, it can be kind of a little startling and a little, you know, kind of scary, kind of because it's unfamiliar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, you just, you know, got to, you know, come into those kind of experiences with an open heart and an open mind. And, you know, yeah, I know for me, like I was startled for sure, you know, but it wasn't panicked. I didn't like drop everything like, you know, you would see in the movies where all the coins just scattered everywhere and I just hightailed and run. No, I kind of observed and listened, and okay, that's a tree hitting another tree. All right, that's not, you know, natural for, you know, any person to be doing. So yeah, just it carried on and just went back into safety of the few hundred people that were there.
Nice. And the warmth too. I bet it was nice.
Yeah. Oh, it was cold. Yeah. Yeah. There was just, when we got up there, it was just like fresh snow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was just the start of the season. So, mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we're kind of moving on to the next question that I always love to ask. And this is kind of where I turn to our guests to, you know, showcase and give some advice for our listeners. You know, you've had your fair share of opportunities to, you know, engage with our communities and our people. You know, so I was going to ask you, Bob, if you'd be willing to share any words of advice for our listeners.
Words of advice.
Mm-hmm.
I think kind of what you just said about Saskatchewan, and it's like go in with it an open mind and an open heart. And I think that's why Kelsey ended up telling me that story, is that's how I showed up. But there's this feeling of I don't want to call it fear, but a fear of doing the wrong thing and screwing up somehow, and
Mm,
somehow doing something irreversible. And I don't know what it is, but our
mm,
settler colonial culture is so different, and there's things you could do wrong, but going in and thinking like, oh my goodness, there's something that you could do that would just be so awful, but realizing that that's not the case. And
mm,
just, I think having more of an open heart is like, I ask a lot of dumb questions. I asked you, what question did I ask you? Am I allowed to wear a cedar hat?
mm,
Was a
mm,
question that we had when the first time I talked to you. And you're
mm,
like, yeah. And it was like, oh, okay, cool. And it's like, I, as a journalist and as a storyteller and as a very curious person, I always ask a lot of questions. and
mm,
and I think that there's no dumb questions. However, when you go in to speak with indigenous people and to make friends, I feel like going in with a base knowledge of what colonization is, what effects it's had, and appreciating that is
mm,
kind of the baseline of where you need to start. And then you can just ask as many questions as you want. And I know that it's exhausting for folks to have to be the one answering all the questions. And
mm,
that's why having a sort of base knowledge where it's like, it is helpful, because
mm,
I'm asking questions that may be kind of dumb, but they're not disrespectful.
mm,
And you come at it from a place of genuinely wanting to learn and make friends, and you'll be welcomed. And yeah, it's I feel like I found a new community with indigenous friends of mine, and it's awesome. That's If that's advice, I don't know.
mm, mm. Yeah, and I know, like, kind of, building off of that, you know, it's really good to ask those questions because you don't know what you don't know.
Hmm.
And so, um, and I always, want to share too, um, for settlers who are interested in engaging, and I really love, hearing you, um, attempting to say some of the names of the places, and hearing settlers trying to, in their territorial acknowledgments, acknowledging where they come from. You're acknowledging the lands that you're on now. Those are important. And, hopefully that um, people can take the time to learn those types of things, and how to properly say the names. And if you get it wrong, that's okay.
Hmm.
And I always love sharing a teaching that my mom shared with me. When I was in my own learning journey, I wasn't doing so good in school, and I was ready to give up. Literally on the phone, like, kind of crying with her, and just, I want to go home, and just kind of feeling bad for myself. And she was just like, "Are you done?" Well, okay, yeah, sure, I'm done. I'm done crying and done feeling bad for myself. And she was like, "Well, you know, you didn't come into this world knowing all of these things. You didn't come into this world. You didn't know how to walk. You didn't know how to talk. You had to learn how to do those things. And, I tell you this." And she's like, "I watched you. I watched you learn how to walk and learn how to talk. And when you were learning to walk, I watched you fall. You got back up. When you were learning to talk, I heard you mispronounce words, but you learned. And you are on a journey now to continue learning in a new way." And, I always bring that teaching forward of learning how to walk, learning how to talk to my work here, my work at Culturally Committed, and work beyond for consulting work, because I really want to see and hear settlers engage in our traditional ways as much as they can, to learn, our language, to be able to learn, the territories they're living in and where they're from. And I do not want settlers to be paralyzed by fear of getting it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the fundamental difference I see in Western society and our traditional ways. Western society really pushes for perfection. We're asking imperfect beings to do everything perfect. That's a fundamental flaw in the world. Where, if you see and you've experienced in our communities, the warmth, the welcoming, and the forgiveness that is in our community. And I, was sharing in a circle recently where someone was asking about their own fears of saying things wrong. And I said, well, that's okay. You're going to have to learn how to do these things, and you might make mistakes. I was like, but the difference is, our people know what it feels like, when, we're forced into something and we're forced to learn another language. But, we know what it feels like to be mistreated, to, yet again, I'll share, our people, specifically talking residential school, where we would speak our language and get hit and beat. And now we have our siaya, our friends who are wanting to learn. We are not going to repeat those same things that were happened to us to others, because we know how bad it feels. And so I encourage people to take those leaps of faith to try and say the things. And if you get it wrong, and you may have our Homoch Mestimuch, our First Nations people, who will be there to help you throughout your learning journey. And it is a journey that, I always share, from my grandmother and my mother, they always share with me that, our learning journey, it is something that is carried on throughout our entire lives. And the only time we are done learning is when the Creator calls us home. And so I encourage our siaya, our friends, our settlers to try. And that's all I can ask of you, is to continue to try and to learn.
Awesome. I love it. I don't even know what to say aside from, the intention behind this is so greatly appreciated. And when I started Vancouver is Awesome, reaching out, to go back to sort of the way that Western society operates and how it doesn't really fit, in everything has to be perfect, everything has to be fast. There would be a story that we would be working on, and it would be like, okay, it's on Squamish territory. It has to do with get somebody on the phone, get
Mm.
Squamish Nation on the phone, and it's like, and to see what they think of this. It's like, well, not everybody at Squamish Nation has the same opinion on this. It's like you can't just form a consensus in the 5 minutes you need to file your story about this particular news item or whatever it might be. So the very much intentional way that you do this podcast as well. We spoke beforehand, and it's just very thoughtful, and I appreciate it a lot.
Heichka, I appreciate your kind words. Yeah, and so as we're kind of looking into our time here, I'd love the opportunity for you to share about the work that you do, and talk about that, and how people might be able to witness and engage in your work.
Cool. Thank you. So hopefully by now I may have come across your social media feed and you saw my face. Um, but if you look up BC Bob on Instagram or TikTok, go to bcbob.ca. That's where bcbob.ca has all my links to all my socials. But I also have a TV show on Czech that is going into its second season. It's a half an hour long, and
Mm,
it's um, same sort of stories that I tell on social media, except I have a lot more time to tell them, and I usually bring in a guest. I'll have to have you as a guest on my show. Um,
mm,
it airs. It's in reruns right now on Czech on Saturdays. You can also watch it online if you go to Czech Plus. It's for free. You can watch it online. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Look out for BC Bob and invite me to your stuff. I would love to
mm,
attend. I've got so many invites this week alone. It's crazy. I can't make it to two of them, but I'm heading out to somebody's doing a carving, some welcome poles
mm,
out at, I can't even remember exactly where it is, but it's a nation that I don't have any friends at, and it's
mm,
between Agassiz and Hope along the Highway 7 there. So I'm gonna go out
mm,
there probably tomorrow and bring that story to social media.
mm.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hmm.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, Bob. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come and sit in a circle with me today. And look forward to seeing the content that you bring forward. And yeah, if you want to engage, take a look at his website, and you'll be able to see the connections to all of his social media. And I know personally for me, I've been following your TikTok for a little while now, and so I really appreciate seeing all the content. And yeah, and thank you all so much, all the listeners for tuning in and listening to mine and Bob's conversation. And thank you all so much, and I'll look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Heichka, te ewer.